The grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton Buckhead was packed with 150 people, all here to celebrate my son's engagement to the woman he loved. The lights were warm gold. The flowers were white orchids. My husband Marcus had paid for all of it naturally. He loved displays, loved being the man who paid for things, loved being seen as generous. What I didn't know, not yet, anyway, was that he'd also paid for a hotel room 3 blocks away for the woman he'd been sleeping with for 6 months. I was sitting at the family table, 4th chair from the left, between my sister Keisha and my son's future mother-in-law, Patricia Chen. I remember exactly where I was, because I remember thinking how perfectly the seating arrangement represented my life at that moment. Perfectly positioned, perfectly appropriate, perfectly invisible. Isaiah looked radiant that night. My baby, all 26 years of him, in his tailored navy suit, with that shy smile he gets when he's happy. He was giving a speech. He was talking about finding your person, about knowing when you've met someone who makes you want to be better. He was talking about Natasha, and I watched him say her name like he was tasting something sacred. That's when Marcus stood up. He didn't wait for Isaiah to finish. He didn't raise his hand or wait his turn. He simply stood, pushing his chair back with enough force that it scraped audibly against the marble floor. The sound made everyone turn. You know that moment when a room's attention shifts? When all the individual conversations die and everyone becomes a single organism focused on one thing? That's what happened. I need to say something, Marcus announced. His voice was loud, confident, the voice of a man who'd spent 28 years believing the world revolved around what he wanted to say. I felt Keisha's hand find mine under the table before Isaiah goes any further with this marriage, with his life, with his future. I need to be honest. I need to tell you all something important. Marcus looked directly at our son. Directly. Not at me. Not at the crowd. At Isaiah. And here's the thing. Nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't arrive as a shock. It arrives as recognition. It arrives as your body suddenly understanding what your mind has been refusing to accept. I'm leaving your mom, Marcus said, still looking at Isaiah. I'm leaving your mother and I'm in love with someone else. I wanted you to hear it from me, not from anyone else. The room went silent. But it wasn't the comfortable silence of a room listening to a speech. It was the stunned silence of a room witnessing a car crash. I watched Isaiah's face. I watched my 26-year-old son, the man I'd raised, the man I'd fought for, the man I'd sacrificed 28 years for. I watched him freeze. Literally freeze. His hand, which had been gesturing as he spoke, stopped midair. His mouth stopped moving. His eyes didn't blink. He looked like someone had pressed pause on his entire existence. And then, I still don't know where this came from, I swear I don't. I smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a defensive smile. Not a, I'm pretending everything is fine smile. A real, genuine, calm smile. The smile of someone who'd been waiting for this exact moment. Well, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife through warm butter. Well, Marcus, thanks for the heads up. Everyone's eyes snapped to me. Because here's the thing, I continued, standing up slowly, smoothing down my dress as I rose. You thought you were humiliating me tonight. You thought you were going to blindside me, make me look foolish in front of my son, in front of all these people. Marcus's face went pale. For the first time in 28 years, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. But the truth is, I've known for weeks. I've been documenting it for weeks, and I've been waiting for you to commit so fully to your own destruction that there would be no way for you to wiggle out of it. I pulled a manila envelope from my clutch, held it up so everyone could see it. Your loss, not mine, I said, and I meant every single word. Then I walked toward the door, slowly, deliberately, with my head up. Behind me, I heard Natasha gasp. I heard Patricia Chen whisper something sharp to her husband. I heard my sister Keisha say under her breath, Amen. But most importantly, I heard the sound of Isaiah's paralysis breaking. The sound of him taking his first breath since his father's announcement. The sound of understanding beginning to dawn on my son's face. I didn't turn around. I just walked out into the Georgia night air, pulled out my phone, and called my lawyer. It's time, I said. That was 8 months ago. And what I'm about to tell you, It's going to change the way you think about strength. It's going to change the way you think about patience. It's going to change the way you think about what happens when a woman stops being a wife and starts being a strategist. Because this is how I destroyed my husband's life without ever raising my voice. This is how I won a war that was fought entirely on a battlefield of evidence, documentation, and perfectly timed patience. This is my story. And trust me, it doesn't end the way Marcus thought it would. Before we continue the story, please check if you're already subscribed to the channel and leave a comment telling us which city you're listening from. We love interacting with you. My name is Maya Washington. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 28 years, I've been invisible. Not in a metaphorical way, though that too. I mean literally invisible. The kind of invisible where you spend 3 decades building a life with someone, and he never once sees the woman actually building it. I met Marcus Johnson in 1996 at a Falcons game. I was 24 years old and I was dreaming. I'd written business plans in my spare time. I'd taken cooking classes at night. I'd saved $8,000 in a separate account that I called Maya's Table. I was going to open a farm-to-table restaurant in East Atlanta, somewhere that celebrated Southern food but elevated it. Somewhere that told the story of where our food came from. That dream was everything to me. It was the version of myself that I believed in. Marcus was charming. He wore a suit to a Falcons game, for God's sake. He spilled beer on me on purpose, apologized profusely, listened to me talk about my restaurant for 45 minutes. He made me feel like my dream was important, like I mattered. 6 months later, he proposed with a modest ring and a promise. We'll chase our dreams together. But that's not what happened. Instead, I started sacrificing mine. His company offered him a promotion that required moving 3 hours away. It's temporary, he said, his hands cupping my face the way they used to when he wanted me to trust him completely. Just a few years to get established. Then we'll move back and you can restart your business. I sold my catering equipment. I said goodbye to my clients. I packed my grandmother's cast iron skillets into boxes. I followed him to a city where I knew nobody. And I told myself it was temporary. It wasn't temporary. It was the beginning of erasure. When Isaiah was born 2 years later, everything became about his career. His business, his ambitions. I stayed home with our beautiful baby boy and poured all my love and creativity into being the perfect mother while my own dreams got packed away like winter clothes. By the time Isaiah started school, I was supposed to restart, but Desmond's company restructured. He took a pay cut. Suddenly, my hobby wasn't practical anymore. We need stability. Darlene, he'd say. And yes, sometimes he called me by the wrong name, like my identity had become so blurred that he couldn't even keep track of which version of me he was talking to at any given moment. Isaiah needs his college fund. We need the house payment covered. Maybe when things settle down. Things never settled down. There was always another reason. Always another excuse. Always another financial goal more important than my dreams. So I got a job at Blue Cross. Then I moved to First National Credit Union. I became the woman everyone trusted with financial information. I became the woman who kept systems running. I became the woman who was so busy making everyone else's life work that my own life, Maya's Table, my restaurant dream, my vision of myself as a creator, that life became something I used to think about, like a photograph from someone else's past. 28 years of this. 28 years of supporting his career moves, planning dinner parties to impress his clients, co-signing business loans with my pristine credit, working overtime to cover our personal expenses while his business got established. 28 years of being the invisible woman who kept everything running. And then, 6 months before the engagement dinner, I found the credit card. I was organizing our home office, preparing tax documents for our accountant, when I found a statement that didn't belong. Chase Sapphire Reserve Premium Card, $15,000 credit limit, in his name only, billing address a P.O. box in Buckhead. My hands trembled as I opened it. $43,000 in 5 months. The Ritz-Carlton Buckhead, 3:20 night, every Thursday. Cartier, $12,000 for 1 transaction. La Vie Spa and Resort, couples packages. Nobu, dinners for 2. And an $8,500 diamond tennis bracelet from a jewelry store I'd never heard of. That's when I understood something crucial. My invisibility had made me blind. And his deception had made me see clearly for the first time in 28 years. I called Rachel Torres, my best friend from college, now a forensic accountant, one of the sharpest minds I know. "I think Marcus is having an affair," I said, my voice shaking as I said it out loud for the first time. "Okay," Rachel said calmly. "What do you need?" "Everything," I said. "I need to know how deep this goes." Rachel spent 3 weeks tracing transactions, following money through accounts, documenting the systematic extraction of our life savings. When she handed me the file, it was thicker than a phone book. Inside was proof that Marcus had stolen $127,000 from our retirement savings over 2 years. That he'd created separate business accounts specifically to hide his affair. That he'd built a financial system designed to fund a completely secret life while keeping me in the dark. But here's what changed everything. Rachel discovered the prenuptial agreement we'd signed 28 years ago, and buried in that agreement, like a time bomb waiting to detonate, was an adultery clause, a clause that Marcus himself had written, a clause that was going to destroy him completely. And for the first time in 28 years, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was awake. I was angry. I was dangerous. I was strategic. I was finally going to matter. Before we continue the story, if you've listened this far and are enjoying it, don't forget to like the video. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep telling these stories to you. For 6 weeks, I lived a double life. 2 completely different versions of myself, existing in the same body, in the same house, in the same marriage that was disintegrating in real time, while Marcus thought everything was going according to his plan. During the day, I was Maya Washington, the perfect wife. I cooked dinner, his favorite meals, prepared exactly how he liked them. I smiled at his jokes, even though every word he spoke felt like a knife. I asked him how his day was, listened to him talk about work, about his plans, about Sierra Blake, whom he kept mentioning more and more frequently as his new business consultant. I played the role I'd perfected over 28 years so completely that Marcus had no idea anything had changed. He had no idea that I was awake now. He had no idea that I was watching. But at night, I was someone else entirely. At night, I was a woman reading through financial documents with the clarity that comes from finally seeing the complete picture. I was a woman in Rachel's office, surrounded by spreadsheets, tracing the systematic extraction of my life savings dollar by dollar. I was a woman understanding, in minute, devastating detail, exactly what my husband had done. Rachel and I would sit at my kitchen table after Marcus had gone to bed, and she would walk me through the evidence one more time. Each transaction was a piece of the puzzle. Each lie was a thread in the fabric of his betrayal. "Look at this pattern," Rachel said one night in early May, about 3 weeks before the engagement dinner. She was pointing at a series of charges. Every Thursday, the same hotel. Every Thursday night, he checks in around 5 p.m. and checks out around 10 p.m., but he tells you he's working late at the office. "He told me he had a late dinner with a client last Thursday," I said quietly. "He did," Rachel confirmed. "But the dinner was at 8:30 p.m. at Nobu, charged to the credit card. And before that, at 6:45 p.m., there was a charge at Sephora for makeup, specifically high-end makeup that I'm guessing isn't the brand you wear." I felt something inside me harden even further. Because this wasn't just an affair. This was meticulous. This was planned. This was someone who had thought through every detail of how to hide his betrayal from me. "He's not just cheating," I said slowly. "He's built an entire system. He's built a life inside our life, and he's funded it with our money." "Yes," Rachel said. "And that's where the criminal element comes in. Because this isn't just adultery, this is fraud. This is theft. This is him systematically stealing from marital assets to fund his affair." Rachel showed me the separate business account he'd created. It had been open for 2 years. 2 years? While I was working overtime at the credit union to cover household expenses. While I was cooking dinner for him. While I was sleeping next to him and believing we were building something together, he'd been systematically extracting money from our life, $127,000 over 2 years. That was the total. "What does he think he's going to do with this money?" I asked. Where is he planning to go? Based on the pattern of spending, Rachel said carefully, I'd say he's planning to start a new life. With her. He's probably planning to propose. He's probably planning to leave you and take as much as he can. When? I asked. Soon, Rachel said. My guess? He's going to do something public. Something designed to humiliate you. Something that makes it look like he's the victim. Something that happens when there are witnesses. I thought about Isaiah's engagement dinner. I thought about Marcus mentioning just 3 days earlier that he wanted to say something important at the reception. I thought about the way he'd been looking at me recently. Not with love, not with indifference, but with something that looked almost like pity. The engagement dinner, I said. Probably, Rachel agreed. That's when I called Patricia Martinez, my lawyer. Patricia was brilliant, sharp. She'd built her career on taking apart men like Marcus, men who thought they were smarter than everyone in the room, men who thought they could hide their actions, men who believed they were invincible. The prenuptial agreement is key, Patricia told me in her downtown office, which overlooked Atlanta like a kingdom she was prepared to conquer. Most prenups protect both parties. But yours, his prenup, it was written with an infidelity clause. What does that mean? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. It means that if he commits adultery, the prenup becomes void, Patricia said, and she smiled. All the protections he built into that agreement to safeguard his assets. Gone. The moment he committed adultery, he forfeited his legal position. And because he used marital funds to facilitate that affair, he's also liable for fraud. So if we go to court, I started. You won't go to court, Patricia interrupted, because the moment I show him the evidence and explain his legal position, he'll settle. He'll settle because he has no choice. He'll settle because his only other option is prison. For 6 weeks, I sat with that knowledge. For 6 weeks, I watched my husband prepare for what he thought was his moment of triumph. I watched him get his hair done. I watched him buy new clothes. I watched him check his phone constantly, texting with Sierra, probably planning their big dramatic announcement. And I prepared. I prepared by going to work every day, performing the role of the faithful wife so well that no one suspected anything was wrong. I prepared by coming home and cooking dinner and listening to him talk about his day, without revealing that I knew exactly where he'd been and what he'd been doing. I prepared by printing documents, organizing evidence, meeting with lawyers. But mostly I prepared by practicing my smile, because I knew that engagement dinner was his planned moment of public humiliation. I knew from the emails Rachel had discovered that Marcus and Sierra had discussed exactly when and how they would tell me. I knew they'd planned it for a moment when I couldn't respond. I knew they wanted to make me look foolish in front of my family, my son, my community. They didn't understand that you can't humiliate a woman who's already decided to matter more than your opinion of her. The morning of Isaiah's engagement dinner, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace, clarity, purpose. I took a long shower. I did my hair carefully. I put on makeup that made me look like a woman who knew exactly what was about to happen, because I did. I chose the deep blue dress I'd bought for the occasion, the one that cost more than I'd ever spent on clothes in my life. I looked at myself in the mirror and I saw a woman transformed. Marcus came home from work and started getting ready. He was nervous energy, checking his watch, texting constantly, leaving the room to take calls. He was a man about to do something he believed was brave and bold and honest. He had no idea he was walking directly into destruction. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like goodbye. "Thank you," I replied. "So do you." When we arrived at the Ritz-Carlton Buckhead, the ballroom was already full. 150 people, family, friends, business associates, my son's future in-laws, everyone important in our lives, gathered to celebrate Isaiah's engagement. I walked in on Marcus's arm, and I could feel the electricity of what was about to happen. I could feel the weight of the moment. I could feel my entire life shifting on its axis. We took our seats. Isaiah gave his speech about love and commitment and choosing someone every single day. He talked about what he'd learned from watching his parents' marriage. He talked about building something real with Natasha, and then Marcus stood up. He didn't wait for Isaiah to finish. He didn't wait for the right moment. He just stood, pushed his chair back with enough force that it scraped loudly against the marble floor, and announced to the entire room that he was leaving me. He announced it to our son. He announced it to 150 people. He announced it like it was a victory. I watched Isaiah's face go from confusion to horror in real time. I watched my sister Keisha's hand come to her mouth. I watched my future daughter-in-law, Natasha, grab Isaiah's arm in shock. And I smiled. Not because I was pretending everything was fine, but because I finally understood something crucial. I was not a victim of circumstance. I was not a woman without options. I was not invisible anymore. I was the architect of what was about to happen. I stood up slowly. I smoothed down my dress. I pulled the manila envelope from my clutch. "Well," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence like a knife through warm butter. "Well, Marcus, thanks for the heads up." His face went pale. He suddenly realized that something was very wrong. "Because here's the thing," I continued, and now everyone in the room was listening. "You thought you were humiliating me tonight. You thought you were going to destroy me in front of my son. You thought you had power in this situation." I opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. "But what you didn't know was that I've known about you and Sierra for 6 months. I've known about the secret accounts. I've known about the $127,000 you stole from our retirement. I've known about every Thursday night at the Ritz-Carlton. I've known about the jewelry you bought with our money. And most importantly, I've known about the prenuptial agreement you wrote yourself. The one with the adultery clause that's going to cost you everything." The room was absolutely silent. "Here are your divorce papers," I said. "Filed this morning. Here's the evidence of fraud. Here are the bank statements. Here's the prenup. Here's everything you need to understand that you just walked directly into the trap you set for yourself 28 years ago." I handed him the envelope. "Your loss, not mine," I said, and I meant every single word. Then I turned and walked out of that ballroom with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear Marcus scream my name. I could hear the room erupt into chaos. I could hear Sierra screaming at Marcus that he'd lied to her about everything. But I didn't look back. I walked out into the Atlanta night air, got into my car and called my lawyer. "It's done," I said. "Perfect," Patricia replied. "Now we wait for him to call, crying and begging to settle." And he did. Within 48 hours, Marcus was calling my lawyer, ready to give me anything I asked for, because he finally understood that your loss, not mine, wasn't just something I said. It was the truth. When Marcus opened that envelope at the table, I watched from outside the ballroom through the glass doors as his entire world collapsed in real time. His face went from confident to confused to absolutely devastated in the span of about 30 seconds. I watched him pull out the divorce papers. I watched him read them. I watched him understand, finally, what was about to happen to him. But I didn't stay to witness his complete breakdown. I had other things to do. By the time Marcus made it home that night, alone, because Sierra had left him at the ballroom as soon as she understood what was happening, my lawyer Patricia had already filed the formal divorce petition with the court. By the time he woke up the next morning, his bank accounts had been frozen. By the time he got to his office on Monday, he'd discovered that his business partner had served him with legal papers. Because Sierra, it turned out, was not the dumb young woman Marcus had convinced her she was. The moment Sierra realized that the money Marcus had been spending on her, the $43,000 in 5 months, the jewelry, the spa treatments, the hotel rooms, the promise of a future together, the moment she realized all of that had been paid for with money stolen from his wife, she did what any intelligent woman would do. She hired a lawyer. She sued Marcus for fraud and misappropriation of funds. She claimed that Marcus had explicitly told her that all the money was his personal money, that he was wealthy, that he was leaving me anyway so there were no complications. She provided documentation, texts, emails, hotel receipts, proving that Marcus had misrepresented himself and his financial situation to her. She was suing him for lying to her about the same thing he'd lied to me about. "That's actually beautiful," Rachel said when I told her that Sierra had taken legal action. "He got exactly what he deserved. He lied to another woman to fund an affair, and now that woman is making him pay for it." But the real destruction came when his business partner found out what Marcus had done. Marcus's real estate development company had been built on reputation. It was built on the idea that Marcus Johnson was a reliable, trustworthy man who could manage complicated deals and large sums of money. It was built on the confidence of investors and clients, who believed that Marcus was someone they could depend on. That reputation disintegrated the moment the affair became public knowledge. News travels fast in Atlanta's business community. By Wednesday morning, every major real estate firm in the city knew that Marcus Johnson was having an affair with his secretary. By Thursday, they knew he'd been stealing from marital assets. By Friday, they knew about the prenuptial agreement and the adultery clause. By Monday morning, Marcus's business partner, Marcus Chen, yes, his business partner had the same first name, which made some of this even more complicated, had called an emergency meeting. "I can't be associated with this," Marcus Chen told him directly. "I found out about this meeting from a friend who worked at the firm. Your personal life is destroying the company's reputation. Investors are pulling out. Clients are canceling contracts. I need you out. Immediately." "You can't force me out," Marcus protested. "I built this company." "Actually, I can," Marcus Chen said. "And I will. You can sell your stake to me at a significant discount, which is generous given the circumstances, or I can buy you out legally, and you'll get even less. Those are your options. You have 48 hours to decide." Marcus's stake in the company was worth approximately $800,000 in a normal market. Marcus Chen offered him $300,000 to just go away and stop destroying the firm's reputation. Marcus took it. He had no choice. He needed cash immediately for lawyer fees. He needed cash to move. He needed cash to start over somewhere else because Atlanta had become toxic for him. The money was gone within 2 weeks. Lawyer fees, moving costs, hotel deposits, trying desperately to hire someone to manage his legal defense against not just my divorce case, but also Sierra's fraud suit against him. I watched this happen from a distance, with a clarity that bordered on fascination. I watched a man I'd loved for 28 years systematically destroy everything he'd built because he'd believed his own press, because he'd believed that he was smarter than everyone else, because he'd believed that he could have a secret life without consequences. He was wrong about all of it. 3 months after the engagement dinner, Marcus was living in a furnished apartment in Midtown. The kind of place that rents by the month. The kind of place you rent when you're in transition and don't know where you're going. He'd lost the business. He'd lost his reputation. He'd lost access to his home. I'd kept the house as part of the divorce settlement, which meant he had nowhere to go back to. He'd lost his son's respect, which might have been the most painful loss of all. Isaiah agreed to meet with him about 3 months after everything went down. My son was civilized about it. He was respectful, but he was also clear about something. "I can't respect you anymore, Dad," Isaiah said. And I heard about this conversation secondhand from Rachel, who'd heard it from a mutual friend. "I don't hate you. I'm not angry anymore, but I don't respect you. And respect is what a father-son relationship is built on. I don't know how we come back from that." Marcus had started drinking heavily, not the social drinking he'd done before. This was the desperate drinking of a man who couldn't face what he'd done. He was going to bars in Midtown, trying to pick up women, discovering that the moment anyone searched his name on the internet, they found the story. They found articles about his very public humiliation. They found pictures of me walking out of the ballroom with my head held high, and they left. Every single one of them left. 6 months after the engagement dinner, I ran into Marcus at Whole Foods. It was awkward and brief. He was standing in the produce section, looking at vegetables like he wasn't sure how to cook them. He was thinner. He was older looking. He was a shadow of the confident man who'd announced his affair in front of 150 people. "Maya," he said, and his voice was small. "How are you?" "I'm thriving," I said simply. And I was opening a restaurant. I was starting the Dream Fund. I was building a life that was entirely mine. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that probably doesn't mean anything, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did." "I know you are," I said, and I did believe him. But knowing he was sorry didn't undo what he'd done. It didn't give me back 28 years. It didn't restore the dream I'd put on hold. It didn't bring back the woman I might have been if I'd had the courage to matter earlier. "I don't think I can fix this," he said. "No," I agreed. You can't. But you can stop being a victim of your own choices and start taking responsibility for them. That's the only thing you can do at this point. I paid for my groceries and walked out of Whole Foods, leaving Marcus standing in the produce section, understanding finally that his loss was absolutely permanent, that his loss was absolutely, completely, undeniably my gain. 6 months after the engagement dinner, I stood in an empty warehouse in East Atlanta, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 28 years. Possibility. The space was perfect. High ceilings, natural light flooding through industrial windows, exposed brick walls that told stories of Atlanta's past. The kitchen was going to go in the back corner, visible to diners through a pass window so they could watch the food being created. The dining room would be intimate but not cramped, maybe 60 covers, which meant I could manage the quality of each plate personally. This was going to be Maya's table. Finally. Actually, really. The renovation took 3 months. I worked with a contractor named Deshawn, who was brilliant at understanding my vision. I designed the menu obsessively. I tested recipes in my home kitchen night after night, perfecting techniques I'd learned from cooking classes I'd taken 30 years ago, techniques I'd never forgotten, because some dreams, no matter how deeply you bury them, never really die. The menu was Southern food elevated with intention, farm to table, which meant every vegetable came from local farmers. Every protein was sourced with care. Every dish told a story about where it came from and who had prepared it. Opening night was December 28th. 1 year to the day after the engagement dinner. I was going to open my restaurant. I was terrified. I was exhilarated. I was ready. Rachel helped me plan the opening. She invited people, not just friends and family, but journalists, food critics, people in the Atlanta community who cared about supporting women-owned businesses. Word spread that the woman who'd walked out of her husband's affair announcement was opening a restaurant, and people wanted to be part of that story. Isaiah came with Natasha. Keisha came with her whole family. Patricia Williams, my lawyer, arrived with her wife. My neighbors came. People from my church came. About 120 people showed up on opening night, and they weren't just there to eat. They were there to witness. "Welcome to Maya's table," I said to every person who walked through that door. My voice was steady. My hands were steady. For the first time in my life, I felt completely solid in who I was. We started service at 7 p.m. The first course was a salad with local greens, roasted beets, and a walnut vinaigrette. Simple, elegant, perfect. It came back empty from every table. The main course was the signature dish, beef short ribs slow braised in a red wine sauce with root vegetables, finished with rosemary oil. I'd been perfecting that dish in my mind for 30 years. I'd imagined plating it 1,000 times. And now, finally, it was real. I stood in the kitchen, and I watched the plates come back empty, and I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, something deeper, recognition, understanding that I had actually done it. That I'd taken my pain and my sacrifice and my 28-year-old dream and transformed it into something tangible, something real, something that people were celebrating. The dessert was peach cobbler with vanilla bean ice cream, served warm. It was a recipe my grandmother had taught me when I was 7 years old, before I knew that dreams could be stolen or postponed or buried. It was a recipe that connected me to a woman who'd taught me that women who cook feed more than just bodies, they feed souls. By the end of the night, every person in that restaurant was smiling. Some were crying. Rachel hugged me so hard I thought she might break me. Isaiah stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me like I was a superhero. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," he said. So proud. But the moment that really mattered came around 9 p.m., after most of the guests had left. I was in the kitchen, finishing some cleanup, when Deshawn, my contractor, came and got me. "There's someone outside," he said quietly. I walked out to the front of the restaurant, and through the glass doors, I saw him. Marcus was standing on the sidewalk, looking through the window at my restaurant, at my dream, at the life I'd built without him. He had his face pressed against the glass like a child looking at something he couldn't have. Our eyes met. His face went absolutely pale. For a moment, I watched him understand, really understand, what "your loss, not mine" meant. I watched him see the space I'd created, I watched him see the people celebrating me. I watched him see that I hadn't just survived his betrayal. I'd thrived because of it. Isaiah appeared next to me, and without a word, my son stepped forward and deliberately turned his back to his father, blocking the window so Marcus couldn't see inside anymore. It was the most powerful thing I'd ever seen. My son, protecting his mother's victory. My son. Understanding that some people don't deserve to witness the triumph of the people they tried to destroy. Marcus stood there for about 30 seconds longer. Then he turned and walked away into the Atlanta night. I never saw him try to come to my restaurant again. After that night, the restaurant became something more than just a business. It became a statement. It became proof. It became the physical manifestation of everything I'd promised myself I would become. Within a week, we were fully booked for the next 3 months. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution sent a food critic who wrote a review that changed everything. Maya Washington's journey to opening her restaurant is the kind of story that reminds us why we tell stories in the first place. After 28 years of putting her dreams on hold, after watching a marriage built on deception crumble, Washington opened her first restaurant. And what she's created is nothing short of extraordinary. Every plate that leaves this kitchen carries with it the weight of a woman's resilience. Every flavor profile tells the story of patience and strategy and the decision to matter. Maya's table isn't just a restaurant. It's a declaration. It's proof that some losses are wins. It's proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Go. Make a reservation. Support a woman who chose to rebuild instead of break. The review ran on Sunday morning. By Monday afternoon, my phone had rung over 200 times with people trying to make reservations. I hired a sous chef named Marcus, different Marcus, a good one, who understood my vision completely. I hired servers who believed in what I was building. I hired a front-of-house manager who treated every guest like they were part of our family. And I showed up every single night. I showed up and I cooked. I showed up and I created. I showed up and I mattered. 3 months after opening, I'd served nearly 2,000 people. 3 months after opening, there were people getting engaged at my restaurant, people celebrating promotions, people gathering for birthdays and anniversaries, people creating memories. And every single time someone asked me about my story, about the engagement dinner, about Marcus, about how I'd had the courage to do all of this, I told them the truth. I didn't have courage, I'd say. I had clarity. I finally understood that my invisibility was a choice I'd made. And once I understood that, I could choose differently. 6 months after opening, I had enough revenue to start planning my second location. 1 year after opening, I was breaking even. 18 months after opening, I was profitable enough to donate a significant portion of my profits to something I'd been dreaming about even bigger than the restaurant. The Maya Washington Dream Fund. But first, I had to open one more thing. Not a restaurant, something much more important. Isaiah's wedding. 1 year after opening Maya's table, Rachel and I were sitting in my office at the restaurant when she said something that changed everything. "You know what you need to do?" she asked, sipping coffee while looking at the month's financials on my desk. "You need to take your victory and turn it into a movement." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean this," Rachel said, gesturing around the restaurant. "This is incredible. You've built something beautiful, but it's just one restaurant, one woman's dream. What if you could help other women build their dreams? What if you could take the money you're making here and use it to help women who are in the situation you are in?" I looked at her for a long moment. "The Maya Washington Dream Fund," I said slowly. "Exactly," Rachel said. "A fund designed to help women who are rebuilding their lives. Women leaving abusive situations. Women starting businesses. Women pursuing dreams they've put on hold. Women who need financial support to matter." I committed a significant portion of my restaurant profits to the fund. That first year I allocated $50,000. It wasn't much, but it was enough to help about 10 women. The first recipient was a woman named Michelle, who'd been in a controlling marriage for 22 years. She'd wanted to go back to nursing school but didn't have the resources. The Dream Fund gave her a $5,000 grant that covered her first semester. She used it to become a registered nurse. 3 years later, she's working at Grady Hospital saving lives. The second recipient was a woman named Keisha, no relation to my sister, who wanted to open a bookstore. She'd been putting that dream on hold for 15 years, because her husband told her it wasn't practical. The Dream Fund gave her $8,000 to cover startup costs. Today, her bookstore is thriving in West Atlanta, and she's supporting 2 employees. The third was a woman named Angela, who'd escaped an abusive relationship with nothing but the clothes on her back and 2 children. The Dream Fund gave her $10,000 to help with housing, deposits, and living expenses while she found work. Today, she's working as a paralegal and going to law school at night. Each story was different, but they all had the same theme. A woman who'd been invisible suddenly given the resources and permission to matter. Within the first year, the Dream Fund had distributed $50,000 to 10 women. By the second year, I'd committed $100,000 and helped 20 women. By the third year, I'd found corporate sponsors and private donors who believed in the mission, and we'd distributed $500,000 to over 100 women. But then something unexpected happened. Women from other states started reaching out. Women who'd read articles about me, who'd heard my story, who wanted to replicate the Dream Fund model in their own communities. A woman named Catherine from London emailed me. "I've been married for 25 years. I'm finally understanding that I don't have to stay. I'm finally understanding that my dreams matter. And I want to help other British women understand that too. Will you help me start a Dream Fund in the UK?" Then came emails from Toronto, from Sydney, from Mexico City, from Mumbai. I realized something profound. My story wasn't uniquely American. The experience of being a woman who'd sacrificed everything for a man, who'd been betrayed, who'd fought back, that was universal. That transcended culture, geography, economic status. So I did something I'd never done before. I created a global framework for the Dream Fund. I worked with a consultant who specialized in international nonprofit work. Together, we created a comprehensive guide for starting dream funds in any country, adapted for that country's legal and financial systems. We translated the materials into 8 languages. We made it open source, which meant anyone could use it. Within 6 months, there were dream funds operating in 23 countries on 6 continents. Women from Japan were starting a dream fund. Women from Germany were starting a dream fund. Women from Brazil, South Africa, Canada, Australia. All of them inspired by my story. All of them wanting to help women in their own communities choose themselves. I received a video message from Catherine in London. She was distributing the first round of grants in the UK. "Maya," she said, looking directly at the camera, "I want you to know that what you started here in Atlanta has reached across the ocean. There are 75 British women who are starting over right now because of the choice you made to matter, and they're going to help other women." And it ripples outward. "Thank you," I cried watching that video, not from sadness, but from understanding the magnitude of what we'd built. Within 2 years, the Dream Fund had helped over 10,000 women across 34 countries. Within 3 years, that number had doubled. By the 5th year, 5 years after that smile at the engagement dinner, we were helping over 100,000 women per year. Research study commissioned by the Dream Fund showed the impact on 47,000 women had left abusive or controlling relationship, and 500 had started businesses, 200 had completed educational programs, same sonity, had purchased homes, 1,000 had simply built lives of their own choosing. Economic impact was massive. Over $200 million in new business revenue created by Dream Fund recipients. Over $500 million in assets acquired or retained by women who would have otherwise lost them. But the personal impact was immeasurable. Children were being raised by women who'd chosen themselves. Generational trauma was being interrupted. Women were modeling for their daughters what it looks like to matter. I gave a speech at a women's conference in Atlanta, standing in front of 500 women. I held up the research report. 4 years ago, I said, I made a choice. I chose to matter. I chose to fight. I chose to transform my pain into purpose. That choice didn't just change my life. It changed the lives of 47,000 women across 6 continents. And through them, it's changed the lives of hundreds of thousands more. What I learned, I continued, is that patience is a weapon if you know how to wield it. Documentation is power. Strategy beats emotion. And most importantly, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's success. It's building something bigger than what was taken from you. One woman in the audience raised her hand. Did you ever doubt? She asked. Every single day, I said honestly. But doubt and fear don't stop you. They just become part of the journey. The question is Do you move forward despite the fear, or do you let the fear stop you? I moved forward, I continued. And that choice changed not just my life, it changed the lives of 100,000 women. By the 5th year, the Dream Fund had become something I'd never anticipated. It wasn't just a charitable organization, it was a movement, it was a way of being. It was proof that one woman's personal victory could ripple outward and touch the lives of millions. I was invited to speak at the United Nations about women's economic empowerment. I was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. I didn't win, but the nomination itself felt like validation that what I'd built mattered on a global scale. My story became a case study in how personal transformation creates systemic change. Universities started teaching about the Dream Fund model in their business schools. Organizations around the world began replicating it. Women who'd been helped by the Dream Fund started helping other women, and it had all started with a smile at an engagement dinner. It had all started with a woman deciding that her loss was completely her gain, not just for her, but for every woman who came after her. 3 years after the engagement dinner, a publisher approached me about writing a memoir, not just my story, but a practical guide. Part memoir, part resource for women in transition. They wanted to capture everything: the sacrifice, the betrayal, the documentation, the strategy, the moment I smiled, and most importantly, what came after. The title was obvious: Your Loss. Not mine. How I transformed betrayal into purpose. I spent 4 months writing that book. Writing it meant crystallizing my entire journey into words that would live forever. It meant making my pain permanent on the page so that other women could find themselves in my story and understand that they weren't alone. I wrote about meeting Marcus at that Falcons game. I wrote about the proposal and the promise of building dreams together. I wrote about the slow erasure of my own ambitions as I became the woman behind the scenes, the one who kept everything running while my own vision got packed away like winter clothes. I wrote about the 28 years. Every single year, every sacrifice, every moment I chose someone else's dream over my own. I wrote about becoming invisible. Not because Marcus deliberately made me invisible, but because I allowed invisibility to become my identity. I wrote about the credit card statement. I wrote about sitting in Rachel's office, surrounded by spreadsheets, understanding the systematic nature of his betrayal. I wrote about the realization that he'd built an entire secret life funded with our money. But more than that, I wrote about the emotional journey. I wrote about the shame I felt. Not shame for what I'd done, but shame that I'd allowed myself to become so small. I wrote about the fear, the nights I couldn't sleep because I didn't know if I was brave enough to fight. The moments when I wanted to just accept his apology and move forward without making waves. I wrote about practicing that smile in the mirror, over and over, until I could hold it without it looking forced. I wrote about the decision to go to the engagement dinner knowing exactly what was going to happen. I wrote about the moment I stood up and spoke my truth in front of 150 people. But I also wrote about what happened after. The legal battles, the restaurant opening, the moment Marcus pressed his face against the glass window watching my dream come true. The evening Isaiah told me he was proud of me. The realization that my victory wasn't about destroying my husband. It was about building something bigger than what he'd tried to take from me. I wrote about the women who helped me. Rachel, who traced every stolen dollar and helped me see the complete picture. Patricia, my lawyer, who understood that my prenup wasn't my enemy, it was my weapon. Isaiah, who froze at his father's announcement, and then stood with his mother when it mattered most. I wrote about Sierra Blake, and how redemption is possible even for those who initially participate in our betrayal. I wrote about how she transformed from the other woman into a partner in healing. Most importantly, I wrote about transformation. I wrote about how pain doesn't have to destroy you. It can educate you. How betrayal doesn't have to break you. It can build you. How loss can become gain if you're willing to choose yourself. The book was published 18 months after I opened my restaurant. It became a bestseller within the first week. It stayed on the bestseller list for 47 consecutive weeks. Universities added it to their women's studies curricula. Therapists recommended it to clients dealing with betrayal and loss. Women's organizations used chapters from it as foundation for support groups and healing circles. The emotional impact was immediate and overwhelming. I received thousands of emails, women from every state, Women from 45 countries, women who'd read my story and finally understood that they weren't crazy for wanting to matter. Women who'd been told by their partners that they were overreacting, oversensitive, too ambitious. Women who suddenly realized they weren't the problem. I was going to reconcile with my husband, one woman wrote. I was going to accept his apology and pretend the affair never happened. But I read your book, and I realized that I deserved better, that my dreams matter, that I matter. Thank you for giving me permission to choose myself. Another. I opened my business because of you. I left my marriage because of you. I'm still terrified every single day, but I'm doing it anyway because you showed me that terror doesn't have to stop you. Another. Your book is being used in women's shelters across South Africa. We're training advocates to use your story as a framework for helping women understand that they have agency in their own lives. The proceeds from the book, millions of dollars, went entirely to the Dream Fund. Every single dollar. Because I didn't write the book for money. I wrote it so that my pain could become someone else's roadmap, so that my victory could become someone else's permission slip to matter. 4 years after the engagement dinner, a young woman named Deshawn walked into my restaurant with red-rimmed eyes and a Dream Fund grant letter in her trembling hands. She was 24 years old. She'd been in an abusive relationship for 5 years. 5 years of being told she was worthless. 5 years of having her dreams minimized. 5 years of believing that leaving was impossible. She'd finally gathered the courage to apply for the Dream Fund. Her grant of $15,000 was supposed to help her escape, but she had no idea where to start or how to rebuild. When she asked to meet with me personally, I saw something in her eyes that I recognized immediately. Hunger, determination, the raw, desperate need to matter to someone, even if that someone was herself. Come work here, I told her without hesitation. Not for charity. Not as a favor. For real. Work as an apprentice chef. Learn professional cooking. Learn business. Learn what it looks like when a woman builds something of her own. And in the process, we'll figure out how to build a life that's entirely yours. Deshawn started the following week, and I watched her transform. She was terrified at first. She'd never worked in a professional kitchen. She didn't know the terminology. She didn't understand the hierarchy. But she showed up every single day ready to learn, and I paired her with my sous chef, Marcus, a good man who understood what it meant to mentor someone back into believing in themselves. Together, they worked through the basics. Knife skills, flavor profiles, professional cooking techniques. But more importantly, Marcus taught her confidence. He taught her that she was capable of building something extraordinary. Within 3 months, Deshawn had moved into her own apartment. Small, modest, but entirely hers. Within 6 months, she was taking night classes for her culinary certification while working full-time at my restaurant. Within a year, she was dating a woman named Simone, who treated her with genuine respect and kindness. She was building a life that was entirely, authentically her own. I want to start a Dream Fund in Alabama, Deshawn told me one evening while we were prepping vegetables for service. Her hands were steady now. Her voice was strong. I want to help other women like me. Women who are young and trapped and don't know how to get out. Women who need someone to believe in them before they can believe in themselves. Then do it, I said. I'll help you set it up, and that's exactly what happened. Deshawn became the director of the Alabama Dream Fund. She took the model I'd created, studied it, understood it deeply, adapted it for her state, and started distributing grants to women in her community. She became, in her own way, a version of what I'd become, but younger, more relatable to younger women, speaking their language in their reality. She became proof that the movement could replicate, that the legacy could expand, that one woman's victory could become 1,000 women's opportunity. Rachel pointed this out to me over coffee one afternoon. You're not just creating a movement. You're creating a lineage. You're creating a tradition of women choosing themselves and then helping other women choose themselves. You're creating something that's going to outlive you, something generational. That same year, Marcus called me. Not about money, not about business, not about anything material. He just wanted to talk, really talk, for the first time since I'd walked out of the ballroom 4 years earlier. I've been sober for almost a year, he said. His voice was small, humbled, Nothing like the confident man who'd announced his affair in front of 150 people. And in being sober, in actually facing myself without alcohol to numb the reality, I had to understand what I'd done. I had to feel the weight of it. "Okay," I said carefully. "I read your book," he continued. "Maya," I cried. Actually cried, because I saw myself in the story. I saw the man I used to be, the man I was when I betrayed you, the man I was when I thought my desires mattered more than your humanity. And I hated that man. I hated him so much. We talked for almost 2 hours that day. Marcus told me about therapy. Real therapy. The kind where you have to face yourself without excuses. He told me about watching my success from a distance, about seeing pictures of my restaurant on social media and understanding that I'd built something beautiful while he'd been destroying himself. He told me about understanding finally what he'd lost. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "I know that. I'm not calling asking for it. I'm just calling to say that I understand now. That the man I am now, not perfect, still broken in a lot of ways, but trying, that man understands what he lost. And more than that, he understands why he lost it, and he understands that it was his own fault. The best revenge wasn't your destruction," I told him. "It was building something bigger than what was taken from me. It was turning my pain into something that helps hundreds of thousands of women. That's the real victory. Not your destruction, my creation." He asked if he could redirect his remaining alimony payments to the Dream Fund. I agreed. Every dollar he'd owed me for betraying me would now go to helping women escape situations like mine. After we hung up, I realized something profound. Marcus was no longer my antagonist. He was just a man trying to become someone better than he'd been, and in his transformation, not his punishment, but his actual growth, I found something I hadn't expected to find: peace. The understanding that transforming pain into purpose didn't require anyone else's destruction. It only required my own resurrection, my own choice to matter, my own decision to build instead of destroy. And that was the real victory. By year 4, Maya's table had expanded to 3 locations: Atlanta, Charleston, and Austin. Each location became a hub for the Dream Fund. I hired women from the fund as staff, paid them well, trained them, and gave them opportunities for advancement. My restaurants weren't just places to eat. They were spaces where women could rebuild their lives while serving food that nourished others. But I also created something bigger: the Maya's Table Academy. It was a formal culinary training program specifically designed for women who'd received Dream Fund grants. We taught professional cooking, business skills, financial literacy, everything needed to build sustainable livelihoods. Within 2 years, we'd trained 500 women. The success rate was extraordinary. 85% of graduates were employed or self-employed within 6 months of completing the program. Some became chefs at my restaurants. Others opened their own food businesses. Many went into completely different fields, but they all left with skills, confidence, and knowledge that they could create something of their own. The international reach had exploded beyond anything I'd imagined. Catherine's UK Dream Fund was thriving with 75 women supported annually. There were now Dream Funds in 89 countries helping over 100,000 women per year across every continent. I was planning expansion to Miami, New Orleans, and Los Angeles for Maya's Table. I was planning a documentary series about women who'd transformed personal pain into global purpose. I was planning a second book about the business side of building a movement. At a women's conference in Atlanta, I spoke to 500 women about the journey. "What I learned," I said, "is that your pain is real. Your betrayal is real. Your loss is real. But your power is real too. Your ability to matter is real. Your ability to fight is real. And if you're ready to do that work, there are people who will help you, including me." One woman in the audience raised her hand. "Did you ever doubt?" "Every single day," I said honestly. "But doubt and fear don't stop you. They just become part of the journey. The question is, do you move forward despite the fear, or do you let the fear stop you?" I moved forward, I continued, and that choice changed not just my life, it changed the lives of 100,000 women. That choice rippled outward in ways I could never have predicted. By the end of year 4, the Maya Washington Dream Fund had distributed over $50 million to women worldwide. We'd helped women escape abusive situations. We'd funded businesses. We'd supported education. We'd interrupted generational trauma. We'd created a movement. And it had all started with a smile at an engagement dinner. 5 years after I walked out of that ballroom with a smile on my face and truth in my hands, I stood in the headquarters of the Dream Fund building in downtown Atlanta. It was December 28th, 5 years to the day, and we were having an opening ceremony. 300 people attended, women who'd received Dream Fund grants, women who'd worked for the fund, employees from my 3 restaurants, family, friends, media, and Marcus, who came to witness without being the center of attention. The building was beautiful, light-filled, designed as a temple to the power of women choosing themselves. Women's stories were displayed on the walls. The Dream Fund model was explained in detail. Success stories were documented. Resources were available. It was a physical manifestation of what we'd built, what I'd built, from one woman's pain. I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by the people who'd supported me, and I looked back at what we'd accomplished. 5 years ago, I was a woman asking permission to matter. 5 years ago, I was invisible. 5 years ago, I didn't know if I had the courage to fight back. Now, I was giving permission to 100,000 women every year to matter. Now, I was a woman who'd transformed her pain into purpose on a global scale. Now, I was proof that one woman's victory doesn't have to stay local. It can become a movement. The research documented the impact. 47,000 women had left abusive or controlling relationships. 8,500 had started businesses. 6,200 had completed educational programs. 4,300 had purchased homes. 5,000 had simply built lives of their own choosing. Over $200 million in new business revenue created by Dream Fund recipients. Over $500 million in assets acquired or retained by women who would have otherwise lost them. But the personal impact was immeasurable. Children were being raised by women who'd chosen themselves. Generational trauma was being interrupted. Women were modeling for their daughters what it looks like to matter. Women were teaching their sons what respect looks like, what partnership looks like, what a man who honors his partner looks like. I gave a speech at the opening ceremony, standing in front of 300 people and a documentary crew that was filming for a series about global women's movements. 5 years ago, I said, my voice steady and clear, I made a choice. It wasn't a heroic choice. It wasn't a predetermined choice. It was a human choice. It was made by a woman who was hurt and angry and determined to matter. And that choice changed everything. 5 years ago, I walked out of a ballroom and I said, your loss, not mine. And I meant it with my entire being, even though I wasn't sure it was true. Even though I wasn't sure I could do it. I believed it, and that belief made it real. Today, we open this building, this space, this resource, this monument to the power of women choosing themselves. We open it to serve another 100,000 women, to help another generation understand that they have the power to matter. I paused and looked directly at my granddaughter, Maya Elise, who was now 7 years old and sitting in the front row wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, already learning that her choices matter. For the young women watching this, I said, I want you to know that you don't have to wait until you're 52 years old to start mattering. You don't have to wait for betrayal to teach you your own strength. You can start now. You can choose yourself now. You can choose yourself now. And there's a whole community of women who will help you. And for the women in crisis right now, I continued, looking into the camera, into the eyes of women I would never meet, but who would read my story. The women who are where I was 5 years ago, trapped, scared, unsure if you can survive. I want you to know, you can. You absolutely can. You will be better than you can imagine right now. You will build things. You will matter. And you're not alone. That evening, After the ceremony ended and the crowds had left, I found myself alone in the library of the Dream Fund building. The space was surrounded by books about women's empowerment, business, resilience, healing, transformation. Rachel found me there, sitting in an armchair, looking at a wall of photographs. Pictures of women who'd been helped by the Dream Fund. Pictures of businesses they'd started. Pictures of homes they'd bought. Pictures of families they'd built. "What are you thinking?" Rachel asked, sitting down next to me. "I'm thinking that 5 years ago, I was a woman asking permission to matter," I said. "And now I'm giving permission to other women to matter. I'm thinking that's a complete circle." "It is," Rachel said, "and you should be incredibly proud." "I am," I said honestly. "But I'm also thinking about something else." "What?" Rachel asked. "I'm thinking that if I'd known, 5 years ago, that my pain could become this kind of purpose, that my betrayal could become this kind of movement, I would have been less afraid. I would have been braver. I would have understood that the worst thing that happened to me was also the best thing that could have happened to me." "Would you do it differently?" Rachel asked. "If you could go back?" I thought about that for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "Because the journey mattered. The struggle mattered. The 6 weeks of preparation mattered. The documentation mattered. The strategy mattered. All of it made me who I am now. All of it made this movement possible." We sat in silence for a while, looking at the pictures of women who'd transformed their lives. Then I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Atlanta stretching below me, the city that had held all my pain and all my joy, the city that had been the witness to my transformation. "Your loss, not mine," I said to the city, to the universe, to the woman I used to be. And this time, I didn't just say it, I lived it. Completely. Authentically. Forever. The story wasn't over. New challenges would emerge. New victories would be won. New generations would learn to matter. But the arc was complete. From victimhood to victory to vision. From one woman's pain to thousands of women's power. From a smile at an engagement dinner to a global movement. And it had all started with a choice. It had all started with me deciding that my loss was absolutely, completely, undeniably not final. It had all started with a woman understanding that when you choose yourself, everything else has the chance to matter too. Later that night, I received a text from Marcus. "I saw the building. I saw what you've built. I'm proud of you. Not because I get credit, I don't. But because you took what I did to you and transformed it into something that helps the world. That's remarkable." I read that text 3 times. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I thought about Marcus. I felt something else. Gratitude. Not gratitude that he betrayed me, but gratitude that his betrayal forced me to wake up. Forced me to matter. Forced me to become the woman I was always supposed to be. I texted him back. "Thank you for understanding, and thank you for becoming better." Then I put my phone down, and I looked at the city lights below me, and I understood something fundamental about victory. Real victory isn't about destroying the person who hurt you. Real victory is about becoming so big, so strong, so powerful, that their attempt to destroy you becomes irrelevant. Real victory is about transforming their worst into your best. Real victory is about proving, beyond any doubt, that their loss is absolutely and completely your gain. And that's exactly what I'd done.